You're here because you're on your bike buying journey. You're looking for a brand new BMX bike and you might be considering a Kink Complete. What's up guys, my name's Douglas, I run Dougsterbob.com and this YouTube channel, and I help people get into BMX by helping them find the perfect bike. This video is going to talk about every single bike in Kink's complete lineup, starting with the Kink Launch and working our way all the way up to the Kink Williams. There's a lot of information here, so stay tuned. We're going to get right into it. Now, first things first, I need to explain where I got all this information from. There's a handy thing called the Dougsterbob app on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. All you need to do is download that because this app has over 80 different bikes on it, and it categorizes them by weight, by park, by street, by dirt. There's so much information about every single BMX bike in this app that you'd be crazy not to use it while you're on your bike buying journey. It's 100% free. And if you're at the point in your bike buying journey where you're just not sure which bike is right for you and you want help from me, you can click the link in the description or up here on the screen and it'll take you to a free bike recommendation. All you need to do is put in your budget, your height, your skill level. I'll look over all the information you provide and I'll send you an email with 3 bikes that are perfect for you. That way you don't have to stress out and look over a million different bikes to find the right one. I'll just send you 3 that are perfect for you. Okay, and that's it. We're going to jump right into the review with the first bike on the list. The 2022 Kink Curb is the cheapest 20-inch BMX bike in Kink's complete bike line. And this bike is made from weak, high-tensile steel. It's a popular choice for brand new riders who have a very low budget. There's a lot of things I need to tell you about this bike, so let's get right into this video. Now, the Kink Curb comes in 4 pretty unique color options. You're going to have to choose between matte midnight black, blood blue, brush silver, and blood orange. Kink puts a lot of emphasis on the color options in the low range bikes because for a lot of new riders, the color of their bike is something that's really, really important to them. This is the lowest priced 20-inch Kink bike for only $369. It has a 20.00-inch top tube that is made for riders who are about 4'10" to 5'3". If you're between that size range, keep watching this video. If you're taller than that, quit watching because the bike is literally going to be too small for you. There's a link in the description for a free bike recommendation that you can fill out. I'll look over the information and send you a recommendation with 3 bikes that are the right size for you. If you got to this video and you found out the Curb is actually the wrong size for you. A disappointing thing about the Kink Curb is the very heavy 27.1 pound weight of the bike. Now, people want a lighter bike because it's going to make it easier to maneuver and easier to control when you're learning new tricks and when you're doing certain things. Lighter bikes are very important, but you have to find a perfect balance between a really light bike and a strong bike. You don't want to skimp on quality to get a lighter weight, but you also don't want to have a really heavy bike, otherwise it's kind of useless. Now, remember when I said that this is a low quality bike? Well, this bike only scored a 1.2 in the quality section of the scoring system. What a 1.2 quality score means is that generally this bike is high tensile steel frame, forks, and bars. The bearings are not all fully sealed, and it has single wall rims. Because of this lower quality, it's recommended that a rider that weighs under 130 pounds is the kind of rider that's on this bike. If you weigh more than 130 pounds, your weight might be a little bit too much, and it could cause the bike to have issues earlier than expected. So if you're under 130 pounds, this bike would be okay for you. If you weigh more than that, you're going to need to find something with a higher quality score. 3 other bikes that have very similar quality to this bike would be the Stolen Casino, the Stranger Spitfire, and the Sunday Blueprint. To be honest, none of these bikes, I absolutely hate the Stranger Spitfire, but none of these other bikes are really my favorite. For the most part, it's better if you save up a little bit of extra money and get a bike with higher quality instead of settling for one of these low quality entry level bikes. Now, because of the $369 price tag and the very low quality score, this bike only scored a 2.36 in the value factor. And what this means is that the price to quality ratio is pretty low. This is not a great bike bang for your buck wise. You're not getting a lot of bang for your buck when you buy the Kink Curb. For example, you could spend $360 and get the Sabrosa Altus, which is a 1.5 quality score. Just a teeny tiny bit better than the Kink Curb for $9 cheaper. Now, if you've made it this far in the video, video, you're probably wondering if this bike is actually for you. And this bike's going to be for a smaller rider, like I said earlier, who weighs under 130 pounds and is on a very tight budget. Maybe you lost all your money in crypto. Maybe you put all your savings in your seat tube of your bike and it got stolen. So now you don't have a bike and you don't have any money to buy a new bike. That's who this bike is going to be for. Low budget person who's pretty small and for the most part pretty new to the sport. The person who rides this bike should ride it primarily on dirt jumps or pump tracks. There's nothing that comes with the curb that makes it any good for street or park riding, so it is going to feel a lot better because of the longer chainstay. When you're riding dirt jumps and pump tracks, it's just going to be a lot more stable and controlled. Now, since this is a low quality bike, the person who gets this bike shouldn't expect it to last much longer than a year, especially if they're a serious bike rider who takes progression seriously. If you're progressing at the normal rate, eventually you're going to be doing tricks that are too gnarly for this bike to handle. Parts are going to bend and parts are going to break, so don't have really high expectations if you're serious about BMX and you end up getting the Kink Curb. Overall, I get it. This bike does have a lot of components. BMX bikes are expensive to make in general, but $369 for a really low quality bike is going to be a no-go. Like, anyone who comes to me first before buying their bike, if possible, if it at all possible, and if they're serious about the sport, I'm always going to push them to spend just a little bit extra money and get something that's a little better quality. Even if this is your first bike, sometimes you need a 20.00 inch top tube and that's going to be hard to find. But if this is going to be your first bike, why not spend a little more and get a bike that's going to last a lot longer? I don't hate this bike, but I do think it's damn near $400 and it's pretty low quality. High tensile steel should be avoided at almost all costs. Otherwise, you'll end up looking like me, and it's not very fun. And so that's what I think about the Kink Curb. Let's talk about the Kink Launch next, which is just a little bit more expensive and the quality goes up just a teeny tiny bit. The 2022 Kink Launch is a bike that some people might say doesn't even deserve to be in Kink's line. It doesn't really stand out from any of the other bikes and therefore it's kind of useless. It's $40 more than the Kink Curb, but not quite as expensive as the Kink Gap. This is the Kink Launch and this is what you need to know about it. But let's talk about the Kink Launch. There are 3 different colors for the Kink Launch, so you need to check all 3 out before you purchase your bike. The last thing you want to do is get a terrible looking color. You will need to choose from Gloss Iridescent Black, Storm Gray, and Gloss Galaxy Green. There's really nothing special about these colors. I mean, sometimes there's a lot of colors that stand out, but none of these colors are super crazy. But newer BMX riders who might be purchasing this lower quality bike really love to have a flashy bike. And that's why Kink puts so much emphasis on having 3 different color options in this bike. The Kink Launch is going to cost $40 more than the Kink Curb, making it a $409 bike. We'll talk about whether this is worth it or not later on. The 20.25 inch top tubes means that this bike is good for someone who's in between the 5'3" to the 5'6" height. If you're anywhere in between there, this bike will fit you pretty comfortably. If you're taller or smaller than that, get a free bike recommendation from me. All you have to do is put in your information. I will check it out and I will send you a PDF with 3 bikes that are perfect for you. That way you don't have to guess. If the Kink Launch is the right size for you, keep watching this review. If the Kink Launch is not, go fill out that bike recommendation form. The Kink Launch weighs 26.25 pounds, which is about the weight of a pretty decent sized toddler. Now, some people say that this is heavy. I like to recommend people bikes under 25 pounds if they're really serious about BMX, but you can shave off an extra pound on this bike pretty easily by switching out the tires and maybe even the cranks. The Kink Launch scored a 1.7 in quality, making it a fairly low quality bike. Now, with a 1.7 quality score, it generally means that the frame, forks, and handlebars are made from weak, high tensile steel. This is a lot weaker than the chromoly option that you will see in bikes later on that usually costs a little bit more. It means that both rims are single wall and the bearings are not fully sealed. You're not getting all fully sealed bearings with this bike. Because of this low quality score, I wouldn't recommend anyone over 130 pounds to hop on this bike and ride it. If you're a bigger guy, if you weigh a little bit more, skip the Kink Launch and get something with better quality. That way it's going to withstand your weight. I'm over 200 pounds. Trust me, I've bent my fair share of high tensile steel bikes. 3 bikes that have similar quality to the Launch is going to be the Sunday Primer, the Fiend O-, and the We the People Nova. All three of these bikes score very similar in quality to the Kink Launch. Because of that $409 price tag and the 1.7 quality score, this bike is going to score a 3.01 in the value factor, making this not the best bike. It's not a very good bang for your buck, all things considered, because a 3 is pretty low. Now, I used the Dougsterbob app to try and find some bikes that were better quality for the $409 price tag, and I really couldn't find anything. So if you're absolutely dead set on this bike, just know you're not getting ripped off, because there's nothing exactly in that price or around the price that scores higher in quality. The Kink Launch is going to be for a rider who's pretty new to the sport with a fairly low budget. They just want to get a BMX bike and start shredding, and they don't have very much experience doing so. The bike is best when ridden on dirt jumps, pump tracks, and even a little bit of skate park riding. It scores very, very low in street. It doesn't have any pegs or any hub guards or even a free coaster to unlock certain street specific tricks. So it will be best if you ride it with pump tracks, dirt jumps, or some skate parks. Since this bike is a low quality, high tensile steel bike, I wouldn't expect it to last much longer than a year, as long as you put in the effort and you do a lot of riding. There are a few things that determine how long a bike lasts, and one of those things is how often you actually ride it. The other thing is how hard you actually ride it. If you buy a bike like this and it just sits in your garage, obviously it's going to last a lot longer than if you rode it all the time. But the bike, because of the quality, it cannot withstand to a mid-level rider and sustained abuse that you will put it through if you're experienced riding bikes. Now, I don't think the Kink Launch is a terrible bike, but it kind of confuses me why it's here. If you're really strapped, really on a budget, you're going to want to go with the Kink Curb, because that bike is $40 cheaper and it's practically the same quality. If you need a better quality bike and you have a little bit more budget, you want to skip the Launch altogether and get something like the Kink Gap or the Kink Whip. And that's the Kink Launch. Let's talk about the Kink Gap and why I don't really like it. The Kink Gap is the first bike in Kink's line where they add in some stronger chromoly, making it stand out significantly from the Kink Launch and the Kink Curb. The Kink Curb is, in a sense, a waste of space, but it does come in a 20.5 version, a 21 XL version, and a free coaster version. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Kink Gap and the Kink Gap XL. We'll leave the free coaster alone because it does score differently in the different sections. The 20.5 Kink Gap comes in two pretty solid color options. You're going to need to choose between matte black patina and hazy orange. The 21-inch Kink Gap XL comes in two different colors, and this is glossy woodman green and matte spotlight purple. What I want you to do right now is go to the comment and tell me which of these four colors you like the best and why. I'll argue with you in the comments because there's only one of these colors that I actually like. The Kink Gap is $40 more than the Kink Launch, making it $449. And like I said, it comes in two different size options. The normal Kink Gap is 20.5, making it good for riders who are between 5'6" and 5'9". The XL version comes with a 21-inch top tube, and this basically makes it good for anyone who's over 6 foot. This bike weighs 26.7 pounds and it scores a 3.6 in quality. A 3.6 quality score means that this bike is made from full chromoly. So the front end of the bike is strong chromoly, the top tube, the down tube, and the head tube, while the back end of the bike is made from weaker high tensile steel. The bars are full chromoly, but the fork is only half chromoly with a chromoly steer tube. This is okay, but if you case jumps or nose case anything, these fork legs can bend. The Kink Gap does have single wall rims, but most of the bearings are fully sealed. Because of this quality, I wouldn't recommend anyone who weighs over 160 pounds to ride this bike. It is a little bit stronger than the Kink Curb and the Kink Launch, but a bigger guy doing some 360s and jumping down stair sets could cause some pretty good damage to this bike over time. Three bikes that have similar quality would be the Hoffman Seeker, the DK Cygnus, and the Fit Trail. The Fit Trail is a good rival to the XL version of the Kink Gap, and the Hoffman Seeker honestly shouldn't even, God. Because of the 3.6 quality score and the $449 price tag, the Kink Gap earns a 5.8 value factor score. This is actually a fairly good bang for your buck bike. It's not going to be as good as the Kink Whip and some other bikes, but it's not bad. Like, you could purchase this bike and be confident that you're not getting ripped off. I used the Dougsterbob app to find bikes that are the same quality for a cheaper price and nothing came up. So this will assure you that the Kink Gap is the best quality bike for $449. $449. The Kink Gap and the Gap XL is designed for somebody who just can't afford the Kink Whip. I'll talk about it later, but if anyone is looking at this bike, honestly, just spend the extra money and go with the Kink Whip. But if for some reason you lost all your money and you can't afford the Kink Whip, the Kink Gap is going to be for you. This person can be a smaller guy or a taller guy because of the XL version and the normal version. The Gap score is highest in dirt, meaning that it's going to be more comfortable when ridden on dirt jumps or on pump tracks. It doesn't come with any pegs, it doesn't come with any hub guards, it doesn't come with anything unique that makes it better in street or park, and the dirt score is about double what the park and the street score are. Because of the chromoly that Kink added into the Gap, this bike is going to last quite a bit longer than some of those lower quality options. It's not a pro level bike. It's very important to remember that only the bars are full chromoly. Everything else is a chromoly and a high tensile steel blend. If you're a mid-level rider or a serious beginner rider who's going to progress at a rapid rate, the Gap won't last very long for you. So it is best, if you have the money, to spend a little bit extra and get something with full chromoly. Now, I think the Kink Gap is a good bike, but it just doesn't make sense to me why anyone would spend money on this bike when it's only $50 cheaper than the Kink Whip, which has about double the value and double the quality score. It's, again, not a terrible bike. If this is the only thing you can afford and you're brand new to the sport or you're pretty inexperienced, this bike will last you as you progress to a mid-level. If you're over 160 pounds and you're pretty serious about BMX, I wouldn't trust the Kink Gap very far, and I would spend the money and get something better quality. All right, that's the Kink Gap and the Kink Gap XL. Let's talk about the Kink Gap Free Coaster, which I'm actually very excited about, and I really like this bike. Now, the Kink Whip is a bike that I speak very, very, very highly of. This is arguably the best BMX bike that you can buy with $500. This is a good choice for a lot of people returning back into the sport and a lot of people who are getting into it for the first time. You're probably wondering if the Kink Whip is a good choice for you, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. The Kink Whip comes in two different color options. You're going to need to choose between Gloss Black Fade or Gloss Sage Gray. Both of these options are pretty solid, but each color option is connected to a top tube size. The Gloss Black Fade is connected to the 20.5 inch top tube option, while the Gloss Sage Gray is connected to the 21 inch XL Kink Whip version. Speaking of top tube sizes, the 20.5 inch option is best for riders who are 5'6" to 5'9", while the XL version is good for basically anybody over 6 foot. There is a weight limit that I associate with this bike, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. One of the downfalls of this amazing value BMX bike is the 20.7 pound weight. That's a lot. That's one of the heaviest bikes in Kink's line, and it doesn't come with any pegs. It doesn't come with a sprocket with a bash guard. It's just a heavy bike. There's a lot of components on there that add extra weight to make this bike heavier than the Kink Gap, the Kink Switch, the Kink Williams. However, saving weight is definitely possible when purchasing upgrades. I have some different YouTube videos about that if you want to learn more about how you can make your bike lighter by upgrading the parts. In my opinion, one of the most impressive things about the Kink Whip is the 6.9 quality score. Nice. But what this 6.9 quality score means is that the frame, forks, and handlebars are made from full chromoly. Chromoly is going to withstand drops, gaps, spins, any kind of abuse a lot more than high tensile steel. This is the first full chromoly BMX bike in Kink's line, and honestly, brand new riders don't need full chromoly, but they're going to progress to a level where they would be glad that they did have full chromoly. So a lot of people who fill out my free bike recommendation get the Whip recommended to them even if they're brand new, because I'd rather see them spend just a little bit more money and get this strong foundation for an upgradable bike. When you have a full chromoly frame, forks, and bars, it's really easy to add other aftermarket parts to make this bike a fully custom bike tailored to your specific needs. Along with the full chromoly parts, the Kink Whip has both double wall rims front and rear. This sets it aside from similar $500 options like the Colt Control, which only comes with one double wall rim. It's also fully sealed. Now, keep in mind, all of the parts on here, while being strong full chromoly, they're not aftermarket. If you look on Dan's Comp, you'll see that aftermarket parts cost a lot. You can find frames that cost $450, which is almost the cost of this complete bike. Aftermarket parts cost a lot more because there's a lot more love and attention paid into the manufacturing process. They also use finer, higher quality materials when they're putting these bikes and when they're putting these parts together, if they're made from aftermarket parts. Now, that's basically what that's saying, is that that's why the Kink Whip didn't score a 10, but it still scored a 7, which for a new rider is more quality than they're going to tend to need. Because of this quality, I set the weight limit of the Kink Whip at about 190 pounds. Now, a rider who's around 210, 200, this bike would still be fine. But if you're much higher than that, you will want to go with the aftermarket parts, builds like the Sunday Darkwave, the Sunday Soundwave, or the We the People Envy, because these parts are just going to be a lot stronger and they're going to withstand to the extra weight that you put on the bike. Now, there are 3 other bikes that score very similar in quality to the Kink Whip, and I think it's important for you to check the reviews out of those 3 bikes before you make your purchase, just so that you can see all of the options. Those 3 bikes are the We the People Crisis, the Kink Switch, and Colt's Devotion. Those 3 bikes all scored a 6.9 or a 6.8 in quality. Because of the $500 price tag and the 6.9 quality score, this bike scores a 10 in value. This is the only BMX bike in the Dougsterbob app to score a 10 in value, and it really sets the standard for all other bikes to follow. No other bike has the same low price with the same high quality score. There are bikes that are close, like I talked about the Colt Devotion and the Kink Switch, but they all cost more than this bike, making their value score quite a bit lower. Because of the 10 value score, you can be assured that this is the absolute best BMX bike you can buy with your $500 budget. Now, I use the app to try and find bikes that are similarly priced but better quality. And while this is the 10 value score bike, there is nothing that came up. However, the Colt Control is very close. The Colt Control is the same price tag with full chromoly frame, forks, and bars. The only difference here is the Colt Control has one single wall rim in the front and a double wall rim in the back, bumping the quality score down just a little bit. The Kink Whip is for someone who has value at the top of their mind. This isn't someone who has money coming out of their ears, but it's also not for somebody who's really struggling to get by. If you just want a high quality BMX bike and you don't want to spend a crazy amount of money, you just want to get the best value bike you can, that's who this bike is for. Since it comes in the 20.5 and the 21-inch top tube option, it can be from anyone who's 5'6" to 5'9", or anyone taller than 6 foot, depending on the version you get. The person who gets this bike doesn't necessarily have to be brand new to the sport, but I would suggest that they're riding at about a mid-level. If you're riding any higher than a mid-level, you're gonna put some extra abuse on this bike and tend to break it. The Kink Whip is best when ridden on dirt and on pump tracks. It's gonna have a longer geometry that's gonna make it feel more stable and more controlled when riding these things at higher speeds. You can ride park on it, but the geometry again is so big, it's not very technical and it's not very responsive. If it came with pegs, it would be a pretty good street specific bike, but without pegs, without a free coaster, and without a bash guard, this bike is not very street specific out of the box and will perform best when riding dirt and pump tracks. The Kink Whip is a full chromoly bike with double wall rims. And while I want to tell you this bike will last forever, the reality is it probably will not, depending on your progression and depending on your weight. All BMX bikes have a certain life cycle and parts do break over time. The way that it goes is that high tensile steel parts are the lowest quality and the most likely to break. Full chromoly bumps it up a little bit with higher quality and more longevity. But then the aftermarket chromoly is where things really get exciting and parts really last a long time. This bike up here on the wall is fully custom, fully aftermarket parts, and it's lasted me over 3 years. I think the only thing I've broke is cranks, forks, and my wheels. But that's all, so aftermarket parts will last a lot longer than the full chromoly on the Kink Whip. Again, it depends on how hard you're riding, how serious you are about the sport, and how quickly you progress out of that mid-level threshold. If you're riding within the mid-level, you're doing mid-level tricks, this bike is going to be a perfect fit for you, and it's going to last until you progress to a high level. Now, you guys know the Kink Whip is my favorite BMX bike, and I would recommend it to just about anyone. If you have a crazy high budget and you just want to get the best quality BMX bike, that's going to be a lot different than the best value BMX bike. In my opinion, this is the best value BMX bike. If you only had $500 to spend on a bike, you'd be silly to buy any other bike because essentially you're going to be overpaying for the quality if you get something other than the Kink Whip. So that's the Kink Whip. We're going to talk about the Kink Whip on steroids. This is the Kink Switch. Let's get right into it. The 2022 Kink Switch is a very popular BMX bike because of the street specificity. It's a very solid choice, but for some people, it's better to spend $100 less and get the Kink Whip. Is the Switch a good choice for you? That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. Now the Kink Switch costs $100 more than the Kink Whip, making it a $600 BMX bike. This is about as much as 3,247 slices of Kraft American cheese. If you're feeling crazy, you could buy the cheese, but you'd probably rather buy the BMX bike. It only comes in one color. It comes in a matte oxblood black. One of the Dougsterbobbers that hangs out in the live streams all the time named Brian has been researching BMX bikes for what feels like a year. He's been narrowing it down to find the perfect BMX bike, and he finally pulled the trigger on the Kink Switch. He uploaded a video. I'll link it in the description if you guys want to watch it. And this matte oxblood black is a very interesting color. It doesn't really look as red as it does in the pictures until it gets out in the sunlight, but it's an interesting color. One side of the bike is like a burgundy red. The other side of the bike is black. Very, very interesting, very unique. The bike has a 20.75 inch top tube, which puts it right in between the Kink Whip's 20.5 and the Kink Whip XL's 21. This bike is going to be perfect for riders who are between 5'9" and 6 foot. The Kink Switch weighs 27.7 pounds, which is actually the same weight as the Kink Whip, until you remember that the Kink Switch comes with 2 pegs, making it slightly lighter than the Kink Whip if you take the pegs off. The Kink Switch scores a 6.9 in quality, meaning that the bike has a full chromoly frame, forks, and handlebars. This full chromoly is going to be a lot stronger than high tensile steel that you're going to find on other BMX bikes. Chromoly is just a 4130 steel, while high tensile steel is a 1020. It's just a lot stronger. We're not going to get in and talk about steel. It's just a lot stronger. So for anyone who's somewhat experienced or just wants a bike to last a little bit longer than your average cheap BMX bike, chromoly is a must. This bike has double wall rims, front and rear, which make it stronger than single wall rims. Double wall rims are less likely to bend, less likely to break when you case a jump or when you land heavy on a spin. And the Kink Switch has a free coaster. This is only the second time in Kink's lineup that we've seen a free coaster appear. The first one was the Kink Gap free coaster, and now the Kink Switch. A lot of people opt in for a free coaster because it allows you to roll backwards without pedaling. This unlocks certain street specific tricks, but it generally carries some slack. And you're going to need to do some research about free coasters and research about slacks before you make this decision. Because of the 6.9 quality score, I wouldn't recommend this bike for anyone over 200 pounds. If it was aftermarket chromoly, I would say, hey, this is a great bike for any weight limit, but since this is just normal full chromoly without the extra attention to detail and the extra quality that's in aftermarket parts like the Kink Williams, the We the People Envy, the Sunday Soundwave, the Kink Switch is only going to be recommended for people under 200 pounds since heavier people put extra stress on the bike. I'm 215 pounds and I've broken my fair share of normal chromoly. 3 similar options to the Kink Switch would be the We the People Crisis, the Kink Whip, and the Cult Devotion. If you're thinking about the Kink Switch, check out the reviews about these other 3 bikes before you make your decision so that you can know some other good options for you. Because of the 6.9 quality score and $600 price tag, this bike only scored an 8.3 in the value section. 8.3 is a really high value score, and we don't see anything over a 7 very often. So you can be assured that the Kink Switch is a high value BMX bike. When you spend $600, you're getting a pretty good bike for that money. Now the Kink Whip is a 10 value score because it's the same quality and $100 cheaper, but the Kink Switch has some different features that make it better for certain types of riders. I'll talk about that at the end, about what the differences are and who the Kink Switch actually is for. I used the Dougsterbob app to find bikes that had a better quality score for a lower price, and I only found one. The Sabrosa Letum is about $604 and scored a little bit better in quality. Another cool thing about the Letum is that it has has 4 pegs and it has that free coaster, full chromoly frame, forks, and bars. So it's like the Kink Switch, about the same price, with more pegs, with a sprocket with a bash guard, and still has a free coaster. Now the Kink Switch is going to be for a bike rider who wants a very good value bike with pretty decent quality, but their main concern is going to be street functionality. Right out of the box, the Kink Switch comes ready to ride street, ready for grinds, and ready for fakey tricks. It has that free coaster, it has those pegs, and it has a very responsive 12.7-inch chainstay, which gives it a pretty good score in park. So I would say the person that gets this bike has a little bit of experience, wants a great value bike, and rides a little bit of street and a little bit of park. Like I said, the Switch is a little bit more responsive than most of Kink's specific bikes, making it a good choice for riding park, but because of the pegs, it adds in some street functionality, and you can put on those pegs, grind handrails, grind ledges, grind whatever you want. So riding park and street is what's recommended for the Kink Switch. The Kink Switch is a mid-level bike that will still take a beating because the person riding this bike is pretty serious about BMX. Keep in mind the quality of these parts are not pro level, so it's still common for certain things to break. The cool thing here is that the full chromoly frame, forks, and bars give you a good foundation to upgrade the other parts and make the bike better for your liking. I just want to be clear that though this is full chromoly, it's not going to last forever. If you want a bike that might last forever, you want something like the Sunday Soundwave, We the People Envy, We the People Battleship, Sunday Darkwave. There's a lot of $1,000 plus bikes that have insane quality that will last a lot longer than the Kink Switch. The quality of the Kink Switch is more than any beginner or mid-level rider needs. I just want to let you know it's not the best quality by any means. So my thoughts on the Switch is that this is a very good BMX bike. The $100 increase over the Kink Whip essentially pays for the pegs and the free coaster. This bike does have that 20.75-inch top tube option, which can fine tune it to be a better size for certain riders. You know, if you're in that 5'6" to 5'9", you might be better off with the 20.5, but if you're right at 5'9", you're going to want to go with something like the 20.75, and the Whip doesn't come in that option. It also has the street functionality. So the Kink Whip is better for dirt unless you put pegs and stuff on there. The Switch comes with that right out of the box. So if you're serious about that, if that's something that's valuable to you, the Kink Switch would be a better option for you. If you don't really care, you just want a really good value bike and you want to upgrade it with your own parts later on, the Kink Whip is going to be better for you. But all in all, the quality is about the same, and that $100 price tag isn't changing that. All right, that's the Kink Switch. Let's talk about Travis Hughes' BMX bike, the 2022 Kink Cloud. The 2022 Kink Cloud is one of Kink's higher end BMX bikes in a very, very bright color. This bike adds in full chromoly, but it also has some aftermarket parts. This is Travis Hughes' signature BMX bike, and this is what you need to know about it. The Kink Cloud is a solid BMX bike. It's Travis Hughes' signature bike, and it only comes in a gloss iridescent chrome colorway. Now, I talked about this earlier, that this chrome colorway might get your bike stolen if you leave it in a sketchy area without it being chained up, because it looks so flashy. It looks really cool, but it also, you don't want your bike to get stolen, and this bike says, hey, I'm an expensive bike, steal me. Oh, what was I doing with my hands? The Kink Cloud is $150 more than the Kink Switch, making it a $749 BMX bike. Kink's line is starting to get very expensive when we look at the Cloud and when we look at the Williams, but the quality also goes upwards. The Cloud comes in a 21-inch top tube, which makes it a great choice for any rider who's over 6 foot. Now, the Kink Cloud only weighs 25.3 pounds, which is very light compared to the Switch and very light compared to the Whip. This is with the 4 pegs, so when you take off the 4 pegs, you're getting an even lighter bike. When we talk about quality, the Kink Cloud scored very high. It scored a 7.4 in the quality score, and that's the highest score we've seen so far throughout Kink's line. When a bike scores a 7.4 in quality, it means that the frame, forks, and bars are high quality chromoly. This bike has 2 double wall rims in front and back, all of the bearings are fully sealed, and the bars are actually aftermarket handlebars. As you know, aftermarket is the way to go if you can afford it, because it's going to outlast the normal chromoly option. It's going to extra outlast the high tensile steel option. So if you can find a complete bike that comes with some aftermarket parts, it's a good choice. Alongside these aftermarket bars, we've got 4 pegs, 0 hub guards, and a free coaster. The free coaster is important to street riders and some park riders like Pat Casey because it unlocks a certain type of style and certain tricks. Because of this high quality score, the bike doesn't really have a weight limit like some of the other kink options. People of all weights could hop on the Kink Cloud and expect it to last pretty well for them. I used the Dougsterbob app to find 3 bikes that have similar quality to the Kink Cloud. And what I want you to do, if you're considering the Kink Cloud, you'd be silly to not look at these other 3 options because one of these bikes might actually be better for you. These 3 bikes are the Sunday Street Sweeper, the Sabrosa Letum, the Sabrosa Malum, and the We the People Trust. All of these bikes have a 7.1 or 7.2 quality score, which puts them very close to the Kink Cloud. Because of the $749 price tag and the 7.4 quality score, this bike scored a 7.16 in value. The value is going to be lower than the Kink Switch because the price went higher without a significant increase in quality. This bike sits at 7.4 in quality while being $250 more than the Kink Whip. The Kink Whip has a 6.9 quality score, which isn't that much lower than the Kink Cloud, especially when you consider the price difference. Now, it's not a bad bike. If you're looking for a high quality bike with a free coaster and with some pegs, getting this bike is still a good choice, and a 7 value score is better than a lot of other bikes. When we do reviews about different brands, we'll be lucky to get over a 5 in the value score. However, I did come across 2 bikes in the Dougsterbob app that score very close to this bike while costing less, and that's going to be the Fly Orion and the Sabrosa Letum. Both of these bikes are going to cost a little bit less than the Kink Cloud while scoring very close to the same in the quality section. The Kink Cloud is designed for someone who likes flashy BMX bikes, who wants a bike right out of the box with street functionality, and who wants a pretty decent value. The bike is higher quality than most of Kink's line, so this person could be a little bit more serious about BMX or a little bit on the heavier side. Either way, this bike is designed for someone who's comfortably at a beginner or a mid-level and wants to use a solid bike to progress into the high-level riding. Because of the 4 pegs and the free coaster, this bike is going to be best for someone who likes to ride street. It's designed with a street package to be functional for street riding and unlock certain street-specific tricks. On the other hand, it is more snappy and more responsive than other bikes in Kink's line, making it a pretty good choice for technical, responsive park riding. Someone who likes to ride a little bit of street and a little bit of park would be very comfortable on the Kink Cloud. Anyone who buys the Kink Cloud can expect it to last for a pretty decent amount of time. It's significantly stronger than high tensile steel BMX bikes, and it does have a few aftermarket parts sprinkled in there, which will definitely outlast high tensile steel or even chromoly. You can still upgrade the Cloud to make it better for your kind of style or your specific needs, but as it comes, it's a pretty strong BMX bike that won't need much upgrades in order to maintain it. So I don't hate the Cloud, but I don't particularly love it. And the reason that I don't love it is because the spot where it's at in price and quality just doesn't really make sense to me. Most riders who need a bike with this quality will get by just fine on the Kink Whip or the Kink Switch. Most riders who want something a little more serious are okay to spend a little bit more and buy a bike from the $1,000 price range. The Cloud is not a bad bike, but it really only adds in aftermarket handlebars and a couple other small minuscule aftermarket parts, keeping the quality at about the same as the Kink Whip and the Kink Switch with a pretty big price increase. So again, I don't hate the bike, but most people who would spend this much on the bike could spend another $200-300 and get a much better choice. Okay, so that's the Kink Cloud. There's only one more bike left that we need to talk about, and that's the Kink Williams. This is the Kink's most expensive BMX bike, and we're going to talk about it right now. The 2022 Kink Williams is the highest quality BMX bike in Kink's bike line this year. This bike is made from very strong parts, and it's made after Nathan Williams' signature BMX bike. Now there's some things that's a little bit deceiving about this bike, and I'll talk about that later on. This is the Kink Williams, and this is everything that you need to know about it before you buy it. The Kink Williams only comes in one color. It comes in a rattlesnake brown, which I was pretty disappointed about compared to their bright candy red 2021 model. The rattlesnake brown's just a little dull for me. However, take a look at it, let me know what you think about it. The Kink Williams costs $899, not quite $1,000, but making it the most expensive bike in Kink's line this year. The Kink Williams weighs 26.6 pounds, but keep in mind this is the weight with the 4 pegs and the 4 hub guards that come included. The Kink Williams scores very high in quality. It scored an 8.4 out of 10 in quality, and this means that the bike has a full chromoly frame, aftermarket forks, aftermarket bars, a free coaster, 4 pegs, 4 hub guards, and a few other signature aftermarket parts. One of the common misconceptions, and it's a little bit deceiving, is that the Kink Williams comes with Nathan Williams' signature Williams frame, and that's simply not true. The way that Kink words it, yes, this is Nathan Williams' signature bike, and what that means is that the specs and the geometries are designed to match his signature frame. But the reason this bike is only $899 instead of $1,200 is because this is just a full chromoly bike that was mass produced for the Williams complete bike and not mass produced as the Williams frame. I know you guys, you want to argue on it, but that's not the case. Like, this is not the signature $349 Williams frame. But the forks and bars are the aftermarket forks and bars for the Williams. Because of the 8.4 quality score, this bike does not have a weight limit like other Kink bikes. This bike would be solid for riders of all weights, and no matter your weight, you can expect this bike to last for you. I used the Dougsterbob app to find bikes that are similar quality to the Williams, and sadly, nothing came up. The 8.4 quality score is very unique in a sense that most bikes sit at that 7 quality score, and then they make a fully aftermarket version that costs a lot more than the Williams and ultimately scores a lot higher. Kink put this here and it scores 8.4 because the frame's not the aftermarket frame, and it's just in a weird spot because most companies don't do this. With a signature bike, they have signature part, which makes the bike cost a lot more and also makes it a higher quality. Now, because of this 8.4 quality score and $899 price tag, the Kink Williams is going to score a 6.76 in the value section. To be fair, 6.76 isn't that good of a value score. It's not the end of the world. This is still a fairly good value bike, but again, it just comes back to what I was saying about this bike not being the best quality for $900. They could have included a full aftermarket frame, bumping up that quality score significantly, and then bringing up the value score with it. It's not the end of the world, but it is a pretty low value score compared to the rest of Kink's bikes. Now, I used the Dougsterbob app to try and find better quality bikes for the same price, and unfortunately there was nothing there. So this does tell you that for $900, the Kink Williams is the best BMX bike that you could buy. The Kink Williams is going to be a good choice for somebody who really likes Nathan Williams. If you want to show your support for Nathan Williams, buy the Williams bike. This bike is street ready right out of the box with the free coaster, the 4 pegs, the 4 hub guards, and it has a lot of unique features to it in terms of aftermarket parts that make it stand out from the rest of Kink's line. So if you're pretty serious about the sport, but you don't want to spend over $1,000, the Williams would be okay for you. This bike is going to be most comfortable when ridden in the streets. It has a nice geometry that will make street riding feel pretty comfortable. The pegs, the hub guards, and the free coaster are all added bonuses so that this bike will feel solid. If you want something street specific right out of the box, that's what the Williams is best for. However, just like the Switch and just like the Cloud, it does have a more responsive geometry, so technical park riding can be achieved. I wouldn't really recommend it for dirt because of the free coaster. When you're riding dirt with a free coaster, that slack can really bite you in the ass sometimes. So be careful with this, make sure you understand how the free coaster works, and if your style fits street and some park, you're going to really enjoy riding the Williams. But keep in mind, this isn't the same quality as something like the Sunday Soundwave or the We the People Envy. Now, for a mid-level rider or a high-level rider who wants a solid bike that they don't have to make any upgrades on, it would be better to get a full aftermarket BMX bike that gives you a stronger foundation. This Williams frame that's not aftermarket isn't the best foundation to have because frames are really expensive to break. So if this frame breaks, you're going to be out a lot of money to replace it, and it would be better to spend that money initially and get a higher quality bike. I just don't like where it sits in terms of price and in terms of quality. Most people who get the Williams, this will be the same thing as the Kink Cloud, they don't really need this level of quality. They would be just fine on a $500 or $600 bike with full chromoly and minimal aftermarket parts, and it wouldn't be worth it to them to spend $900 on this bike that has mostly aftermarket parts. And the people who have an abundance of money and just want the best quality BMX bike, they wouldn't get the Williams either. So the market of this bike is a little bit confusing to me because it's just right in the middle of where most people would settle on the BMX bike. This does show up in my free BMX bike recommendations from time to time because there are a handful of people that this is perfect for, but not very often. Usually you don't need this high of a quality bike, or you can spend a little bit more to get an extra high quality bike. I know that's a lot of information, and don't forget about the free bike recommendation where you can get a recommendation from me personally with 3 bikes that are perfect for you. The link for that is in the description. We're also doing a giveaway with Dan's Comp. You can win a $100 gift card to freshen up your new bike with parts from Dan's Comp. All you need to do is click the link in the description for that, put in your email address, and you're going to be entered to win. It's super easy, and who doesn't want free money for Dan's Comp?